Here, this is Cindy Starkley. She's our new executive assistant office manager. So, the meeting minutes were gentleman number 1 and gentleman number 2 because she doesn't know
I
anybody's
apologize.
voice. So if there's anything in the meeting minutes that is misrepresented, let us know. Alfred Knotts, Park City Transportation.
Kim Felstead, Park City Transportation.
Cindy Stockley, Park City Transportation.
Robbie Smoot, Park City Transportation.
Matt Dias, City Manager, Park City.
Andy Bierman, Park City.
Caroline Rodriguez, Summit County.
Kim Carson, Summit County.
Doug Clyde, Summit County.
Tim Henney, Park City Council.
Jamie Danzy, Summit County.
Scott Birmingham, Park City.
Jamie Nguyen, Park City Traffic.
Margaret Flanagan, Park City.
And then we have some members of the public here. So, if there's any public comment, we will take that now. Also, I'd like to congratulate Matt. I don't know if the press release has been published, but Matt is officially our city manager.
Speech.
If there's any public comment, Bev?
Me? I always like to know that. I don't have to tell you why.
Come on up, Bill.
Hi. Okay, last time I was here, I told the story, I told you guys and gals the story about a woman who lived in Trailside who was beside herself angry because she got stuck in traffic going down 248 to get to her job. And she wanted so much to take a bus, but there was no way she could take a bus without going up to Kimball, and up to Prospector. So, you know, that's that story. So this story is kind of a good one. This is about a community climate change meeting that I initiated because I can't help this stuff. And so what prompted it is that this high school student last spring named Naomi Smith wrote a guest editorial, and it was in the Record, and it caught my eye. She had gone to the student climate rally in Salt Lake, and she wrote about that, and she wrote about her frustration with nothing happening. So I met with her thinking, aha, this could be a girl who would work on transit and getting people to ride the bus, and you know, and that would be a sustainable activity, and hopefully the young people who think it's a piece of cake to ride the bus could get older folks, including parents and what have you, for some kind of reinforcement to, in fact, try the bus. So then, that was May, and so we said we'll get together in the fall. So she wrote another editorial, a guest editorial, and also presented at the 2030 Mountain Town conference that was held here, Climate Change Conference. And this editorial was a little stronger, and the headline had the word demand in it. So I knew she was getting a little less patient. So I contacted her again, and we started talking, and she really was insisting that adults, officials in the community reach out to students, because she knew her student peers were not going to do it, and try to get something going. So she is one of 3 co-presidents of the PC Earth Club, which I think is a very cute name. I like Earth Club. So we put together a meeting time, and I have to say I was so dazzled with the number of people that attended. And I basically invited anybody I knew who I thought would like to know or be involved in climate activities. So, I mean, there were like 14 of us there. Jamie, thank you. Andy and Vinny, Darcy Glenn, Luke Carton, Chris Cherniak, the principal, Roger, Pat Putt, Peter, 2 Earth Club co-presidents, their advisor, who is now going to be looking into a PC CAPS course strand next year to add to the strands they already have, which will be a sustainability strand, and she is incredibly excited, like, calm her down. I was there and a few people, you know, a few others. So we had a really good conversation. Naomi had a little slideshow, and she was interested in having us come to a meeting, the next meeting that the Earth Club held, and talk about careers the people who would come and talk about their careers in sustainability. And that also happened. And there was a decent turnout there. It was 20-ish spread out in the auditorium. And that went well. And there was some, after the meeting, some kids came up, talked to Pat, Peter, Jamie, Mary Klosser was there and presented. And so there was a little bit of movement, and that was good. And so that happened, and that's where we are with that. The principal, the PC High School principal, is very, very interested in working on parking. He said parking spaces in their school pay for their police security person or something. So that's certainly an impetus to have lots of parking spaces. And so he related that there are some families in our community with children with more than one child who go to the high school that may have 2 parking spots because their children each have their own car and they drive to school. So Roger is sort of on to that. He wants to get rid of some spaces, maybe tied into achievement, reinforcement programs, something to encourage kids to ride school buses, city buses, ride their bike, all that kind of stuff. So he's really on that, and I'm sort of optimistic that will happen. Meanwhile, out of this meeting came a conference call that Mary Klosser put together with the Sustainable Transportation Head of Boulder Valley Public Schools, Peter Hurst. We talked with him, Roger and Naomi and Mary and I, and they have a dedicated position within their school district who deals with sustainable issues. And I went on their website, and it's all about coupons and data, and have your mom drop you off a half a mile from school and not get in the traffic and all those kinds of things. So they're doing that, and that was real helpful. Roger, our principal, thought that was really good. So moving forward, the other item was, as a result of Naomi and I getting together simultaneous with PC Foundation, announcing climate change grants for the first time. I thought, perfect. I mean, kids should be able to get a climate change grant. So I encouraged them to write one, and they did, and they got it in on time. And their topic is they're working on plastic recycling and composting. So they wrote a grant for a few $1,000s and submitted it, and then a couple of us wrote support letters to Ollie Wadler about the kids. And so we're hopeful that they in fact will get this grant, which would be a huge plus psychologically and everything else wise if they got this from a foundation. So that happened. I rode the e-bus to Summit Park on day 3 in the under cover of darkness. It was a very dark night. And so we went to Pine Brook. I was the only one on the bus. It was an e-bus, and so think power. So we went under Route 80, and couldn't find the bus stop on the other side yet or something. So we got on the freeway, looking at Parley's ahead of us, and I gotta say, we slowed down significantly, and I thought it was something like 21 or even 18 mph. And we went up, which was okay, we got off, and I got dropped off at that T intersection, and I got picked up, and it was great. But, and then coming home, we went on Kilby. So my question was, why don't we go out and back on Kilby? And Vinny was good enough to say, because eventually we gotta pick up Jeremy. And it's hard to go up and back and then have to turn a bus around and come back. So no, I get that. And he also, because I know now, I won't spread the rumor about why are these people putting an e-bus going up the highest slope we have, And Vinny also explained that the bus also often has to wait at Pine Brook just for a time thing. And so the bus is waiting perhaps, 30 seconds, a minute, and which is fine. And if it was a diesel bus, we'd have an idling fumes problem. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, I get it. So I guess as long as the bus travels in that fourth lane with flashers on, life is good, I guess. The bus goes to Summit Park and, you know, there's a store there, so I got picked up, so I'm not gonna complain that there's no place for people to park out there. And Scott, I hope you take that into consideration before you do your writer's numbers, and they're really low.
They're actually not low.
Good, I know, well,
We've had 100 people in the last 5 days.
Nice.
Yeah. So is there anything else, Bev, so we can?
No.
Okay.
Was that over 5 minutes?
A little bit. Quality
Oh,
over.
you can just go like that.
No, it's fine. Anything else from the public? Linda, anything? No? Okay. Nothing over there? Okay. All right, so we have the onboard survey. I know we wanted to talk a lot about Bonanza Park, so we put that on as just an acceptance. We wanted to get this in front of you guys, because we do want to take this to our council too. I don't know if Caroline, if you're gonna take the onboard survey, but, it's probably something we would just do as a staff communication, so. If there's any questions on that, if you wanna pull it off, then that's fine, but I think it speaks for itself. We did the spring and the winter, and we'll continue to do those, over the course of a cycle, and probably not for, annually, but maybe over the next 2 years or so. But that will actually go into our short-range transit plan too, so that is a task that will come out of that contract actually, so it won't be duplicated. Acceptance of the minutes is next on the agenda. There's no comments on those, we will move along. And Robbie, do you want to handle the ridership report?
Yeah. So, there's 2 months of ridership reports that we've gone through since the last time we met together. We had a big increase in ridership in October, and then November is similar to our trend over every month. A lot of that increase in October comes from the Lime running. It only ran for a few days, I believe, in October of 2018, and only served the canyons. So it's like 11,000 passengers increase. So that's made a big difference. One exciting thing is we've just surpassed the 1-year mark of Ecker Hill Park and Ride being online. That came in the middle of November, and another milestone we're hitting is this next coming month we will be using the same method for counting passengers in each month we're looking at. That's exciting for me because it's been challenging to combine one method with another method. So next month we will have that. So far in this one in November we have a big increase on the red route, and that's because we had ran the yellow route last year in November, and we did not do that this year. And then you're also seeing that our efficiency metrics, our passengers per hour and our cost per passenger are improving year over year, and that's even with the large addition of hours. The following two reports are the rolling year over year, same report, just different time frames. And you can see that the increase in our passengers and hours are almost staying up with each other, which is, I would say, a very promising thing, because when you expand service, especially to the degree that we did, you generally anticipate a lag in picking up the passengers that it's going to be serving. So hopefully this trend will continue as we move on. We add hours, we add passengers. So if there's any questions or comments, that's about all I have.
We continue to see essentially double-digit increases.
Yeah, we're over 10%.
Month over month.
Yeah.
I thought this was really exciting, you know, looking at the black, I mean, particularly for us, and then, like you mentioned before, the Ecker route, that's really encouraging. There's a couple areas, I still think we need to take a look at the brown.
What? One thing about the brown is this is the first time I was able to actually give you the percent change for the brown just by itself without having the pink influence it.
Uh-huh.
And it was up 7%. So,
which is-
I mean, that's
is good.
promising.
Let's just keep an eye on that one, and make sure that that's really, you know, we look at, I mean, there's some people in there that we know, don't have access to, you know, a vehicle. So I'd like to make sure we're giving them the frequency that'll encourage them or enable them to use it for.
Is there an HOA out there in Carolina Trailside or Highland Estates?
I'm sure there is, but just like you guys, we have a ton of HOAs, but I can ask planning. They try and maintain a list.
Okay.
Robbie, the reports are looking good.
Oh.
They get more and more dialed in, and they're readable. They have most of the info we want in there. The numbers are also looking good too. It's nice to see the trend that we're increasing both ridership and the cost per passengers for most routes are coming down. So we're headed in a good direction.
Yeah, I think
It's
we've
nice
got-
to be able to know that.
Yeah, I think we've got the routes pretty dialed in. I don't think we anticipate, and after the Summit Park expansion and out to Quinn's too, that I don't think we really anticipate any other route changes coming up. So once we get the consistency and the continuity within the system, so. And it has been encouraging. I've been on the Summit Park route. Well, I live out there, but I've been on it several times, and it's really cool to see all the little kids that are on the bus too.
Uh-huh.
Now get to kind of pick up their friends at Pine Brook and Jeremy and everything too. So it's been very encouraging.
And too bad Steve's not here, cause he'd like the percentage.
Percent change.
Yeah, the percent change.
Another thing that I've been looking at, and it's great to see, is that Acker Hill Park and Ride has been consistently in our top 10 most used stops. So it is being utilized.
Do we plan to add blue to this?
Yeah, the blue is, it just started it comes on in the full winter service, so it'll be in December. It doesn't operate in November.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we came on December 6th.
It's gonna see a huge percentage increase this month then.
Exactly. As long as it doesn't get hit with snowballs in the Thames Canyon area. If there's no other questions, we'll keep these kind of rolling reports going over the next meeting as well. So the next thing we had on here was an update and discussion on Bonanza Park, Arts and Culture District, and the Transit Hub. So I put together a quick little synopsis here and staff report regarding the plans for the area. Bonanza Park has been identified in several of our planning documents as a transit node, and how that fits into the Arts and Culture District, I guess has been a question or needs to be discussed amongst our partners here. So essentially, what we're planning to do is the Arts and Culture District with our partners at Sundance and Kimball, and then affordable housing units in the area and mixed-use development is planned for the Bonanza Park area, essentially bound by the Woodbine area to the west, and then Bonanza Drive to the east, and then Munchkin to the south, and 248 to the north. So that whole area we purchased, back in, was it 2017, I think? Oh, it was 18. This one we closed right after the calendar year. So, and that's all being developed under a master plan with our partners, and then building some transit components into that, just as we would at Park City Mountain, which we've identified for, again, different transit elements in there, and Deer Valley as well. Once that plan comes on, is to build that into the site also. And again, Bonanza Park, with the Old Town Transit Center still being essentially our primary transit hub also. So what we want to do is be able to discuss. I know that there hasn't been too much of a plan yet. We've been working with our partners at Sundance and Kimball, and also internally about the footprint of the site and how that's laid out, access on and off 248 and Bonanza Drive as well, and then being able to build in how that plan and service plan works would be an update to our short-range transit plan, which we've talked about as well also. So again, it hasn't really been laid out specifically about how those service elements will occur, what routes would serve it, but obviously the county would have a big influence and input into how those routes serve that area. So we just wanted to bring this before you guys and be able to discuss, because there's been a little bit of, I think, lack of clarity about how this element would work and how that project would be influenced by transit. So with
I
that.
look forward to the conversations. You know, it's, of course, makes total sense that Bonanza would be a major transit hub. I guess our biggest question, and I don't know that it's a concern at this point because we just don't know really what the plan is, but how BRT will connect with that being the terminus.
Mm-hmm.
How that will actually function, and how people coming from the Kimball Junction area will get to where they need to go. You know, right now, a lot of them take the White Express all the way to Old Town Transit, or they'll get off and change maybe at the stop right there at Fresh Market. If they wanna, or they'll catch one of the other buses. You know, there are other options besides the Express. But how can we get them efficiently to where they wanna go?
And I think, you know, something that's also important to point out too is not necessarily the trips that are destined for the site, it's also the trips that are being generated out of this site too.
Right.
I mean, it's gonna, with Homestake and our other affordable housing projects, and what's gonna be built into that site is on a daily basis during that AM peak is, there's gonna be trips coming out of this site too, so. I don't want that to get lost also, so, a lot of employment.
What does the Bonanza plan look like nowadays? I mean, it's been through many iterations. Is it still iterating, or is it, is it gluing, is it gelling?
It's still, no, it is gelling, you know, and we continue to work with our partners. So right now, the conceptual plan in terms of transit is that the transit access would come off of Bonanza and go below grade down there. And there's essentially 6 to 7 stalls down there. Something else to consider is that the Old Town Transit Center essentially at this point is really kind of almost at capacity as it is. So this would be another access point, another node, and have the ability to store buses overnight also and have charging stations and things like that, infrastructure where we'd be able to store buses and not have to deadhead out of areas. They could start their trip from that location also. So that's essentially the conceptual plan as it relates to transit. Right now, the other elements and footprints I think are pretty well laid out. The concept is really to have those 2 anchor tenants and then have parking to support the site, but also look at parking reductions as well because of the transit element and the walkability and the connectivity within the site, and then also to adjacent land uses also. And the Homestake parcel as well is going to have a 40 to 50 affordable housing units on it as well. And then the Munch.
Can I just drive that home, because
Yeah.
there's been some misperceptions that this is gonna be a park and ride at the transit center. The parking there is in support of the housing that's there and the businesses and nonprofits on site. The intent is not that people would drive and park there. The park and ride we'd like to put out, and we're engineering right now, is out on 248, as well as the ones that are out this way.
And then the other element of the project too is to extend Munchkin Road also to connect over to Homestake through our parcel that we have with Recycle Utah also. So just to kind of paint that overall picture about the site and how it would operate and create more of a complete street through that corridor also.
And the bus stop will be underground, and there'll be room for 6 buses, is
Yeah.
that what you said?
Yeah, that's the layout right now. And then once we kind of get all that physically laid out, and then I think that's the next step is what we would do is look at the short range transit plan about how to develop that service plan about how it would access other areas and be able to kind of feed in directly to Old Town Transit Center, out to Quinn's, into Kimball and those areas. And to your question, Kim, too, see that this precludes a BRT route going directly from Kimball into Old Town Transit Center also. So
Okay.
it's not the end all be all.
Because we did a study on that, didn't we? Collectively, the 224 study?
We did
What
the
were
alternative analysis.
What were the recommendations there in terms of the white?
It just showed that would actually be one of the termini into Bonanza Park also.
So would there be a transfer at some place like the Canyons where you ride it there and then you get on the Old Town Express or the Bonanza Express, or would it be every other bus? One would go Old Town, one would go Bonanza? What's the thought on that? Or are we gonna try to run all of them to one single location?
No, I wouldn't see them going all to one single location. Again, that needs to come out of the service plan.
So there's lots of possibilities. There would be some means of determining which one goes to which location running on the same route.
Yeah, there'd be a demand analysis done through the short range transit plan. And again, going out into the public and talking to employees and employers about what best meets their needs also, and then what you guys with the county would see as being beneficial to them also.
So some info, I don't know if we have it. If we don't, it might be worth gathering, is determining how many people in White depart from Fresh Market, get off there as opposed to coming all the way into Old Town. And then secondly, knowing how the riders of White, how many of them take a transfer versus get off at Old Town and walk to work or something.
Yep.
Because I suspect most of them, even though they're taking the express, still have to get on a transfer at Old Town or Fresh Market.
Fresh Market,
to
yeah.
get where they want to go.
Fresh Market is, don't correct me if I'm wrong, Robbie, is that number 2 stop?
I think it's
Or 3 behind Kimball? Okay, Old Town, Kimball, and then Fresh Market. Okay. So there's a lot of volume there, and there's Scott, there's a bus probably every 7-10 minutes that comes by.
Probably less than that.
Fresh Market.
The high school students use it big time, that red to the white transfer.
So I think having that data is really gonna help determine how changing that location will impact things. And then part of, just to reiterate part of the logic behind why we feel like we need to move a lot of the transfers or a lot of the terminations into the Bonanza Park hub is the fact that both Park Avenue and Deer Valley Drive during peak times get utterly congested. And unless we can put in dedicated bus lanes on those roads, the buses don't work because they're just stuck in traffic. So the thought is if we get them to Bonanza, one, every way that isn't going into Old Town doesn't need to go in the congestion and come back out the congestion. But also we are looking at potential aerial or micro transit or ways that we can move people around that are less likely to get stuck in the congestion. That would be sort of rapid transfer out of Bonanza is the long-term plan. We don't believe that Old Town Transit Center, it'll always be part of the system, but ultimately if we continue to load it heavier, we're just gonna have more and more breakdowns in the transit system because the buses will just be stuck on Deer Valley Drive or Park.
But if that's where people are going, we need to make sure that they can get there efficiently without having to be redirected pretty far off course and then.
And ideally, that's why we take them to Bonanza and then aerial carry them right into Old Town over the traffic. That's one of the scenarios we're looking at.
Otherwise, they sit in traffic on Park Avenue or
Yeah.
Deer Valley Drive and they're not getting to where they wanna go anyway.
So it's a geography problem we have really up there, and that we can't really expand the roads. And we got so many people trying to go in there. That's what we're trying to unwrap right now.
And 2 years ago? 2 years ago, we made a CIP request to look at reversible transit lane on Bonanza Park, or Bonanza Drive also, because that is a local road, which we don't necessarily have that flexibility on other areas of 224 and 248 to use that center turn lane potentially. So it's probably another request that we'll make this year as well.
Isn't part of the confusion coming from, the alternatives analysis on 224 that, to use Roger's term, put a pin in Bonanza for a transit hub, and there's sort of a conflating a transit hub and a BRT route terminus. So, I don't necessarily think that one determines the other. It creates an opportunity and possibility for one, but the pin went in based on your study, Caroline. I mean, maybe you want to.
No, that,
I've read the study that
but,
says.
yes, the study says that, but the order of events is a little bit different. In order to do the study, we had to tell them where each terminus was. And on our end, it was Kimball Junction. On the Park City end, before we got into the study, we told the consultant the terminus has to be at Bonanza. It wasn't that we did the study and they said, go to Bonanza. That's where we told them to look at the corridor going to Bonanza. And it was a BRT terminus at Bonanza.
Right. And I believe that was your request, and we kind of, for me, it was always, seen as a placeholder, and we would see how, we would learn as time went on and we did more studying just how it would work. We just need to make sure that if we're being routed that way, if those using it are being routed that way, that it can be done efficiently
Mhm.
and effectively. It's not that we're throwing our hands up at it whatsoever.
I still hear concern about the terminus of BRT versus a transit hub. So is there a problem with Bonanza Park being identified as a transit hub? Irrespective of
I
how it
think that's-
got there, what the study said, what the pattern
Okay.
was, because the study identified it, put a pin in it, placeholder or not. Let's separate out the BRT aspect and just say, are you guys okay with a transit hub in the Bonanza Park district or in Culture District? I mean, that's
I mentioned that-
transit-oriented development, and that's something that we would do in any high-density development, just as you would, I think.
As I said when I first made my comments, today, it's just only natural that would be a transit hub.
So
Our
why are we
biggest
getting the
concern-
comments about there's a pin, it's a placeholder, it's this or that?
That's referring, I think, really to the BRT. We've gotta
Is
make
that
sure that.
council-wide, or is that just the two of you here? Because I'm not hearing that in conversations
Well,
and
I'll
comments.
I'll
made by
talk
other
to my fellow
members.
council members and I'll make sure that they look at how they, the semantics involved.
Well, you guys
But
just had
to-
a visioning session, I listened to that, and there were a lot of semantics involved that don't really identify or support that as a transit hub.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that. For us, it's how it works with BRT. And we're getting ready to launch into the NEPA phase, and we just have to have a clear idea of how that's going to work and be effective.
Well, you know, your visioning was good because it said, in order to determine our own future and have control over our transit system in the county, we need to be proactive. We need to have a vision and have an idea of what we're trying to do. And this is an opportunity for you all to say, if we're gonna run a white line spine BRT, we need the terminus to be in this location. And what we've got right now is a placeholder, a pin over here, possibilities over there, visioning going on about how essential transit is or is not. I mean, we need to kind of get going on this at a minimum.
Well, I think
Well,
it's
trust me, but we've never heard the plan. That's why we asked for more information. We've never been told how it's envisioned that the BRT terminus could be at the Bonanza location.
I guess we've
We're
never been
definitely
told what
open
the
to that.
requirement is from the county as far as where you'd like that location to be. I mean, that's how I would kind of look at it from an elected standpoint. It'd be like, look, we
Well-
got this system with these routes, you guys have a lot of input coming from the county, how it merges, how it transitions from county transit to city transit. You can have control over that if you say, we need it to go here, we're willing to pay this to get it to go there, let's make that happen. And what we hear is like, yeah, we don't know what the plan is, we don't know how this got there. This is in the study that we've approved in a resolution, and yet here we are now questioning the findings of the study. So I'm very confused.
Okay, I think that we had that explained earlier from Caroline, that the terminus was selected by Park City, and you were saying that's where you wanted it. And so we need to
So
figure
you
out
commissioned
how
the
it
study,
works.
you paid for it, and then you affirmed it in a resolution.
So,
We also got to the point where we hit 224 and 248 and we identified the constraints of the right-of-way along there too, where at that point, everything has to kind of commingle with general purpose traffic at that time too. So we recognize that there was constraints going south beyond 248 also.
Yeah, I think one of the general questions from the council is just, how is it gonna function? Because 224 and 248 with that intersection is, we know is really problematic. You can't do much without blowing up the Jess Reed building and doing some major, maybe taking away the R1.
But you're also aware that we have times where Deer Valley and Park Avenue are completely gridlocked and shut down.
Of course, yeah.
So that
Yeah.
cripples the system right there. We know
Yeah.
that. We've had years of experience. We know it's getting worse, not better.
Yeah, no, I think all that you're hearing is just an expression of, geez, if that intersection is sort of at its limit, essentially. What are you gonna do there? How's it gonna work? Is it gonna be functional? They're just general questions, I don't think they're more complicated. But the question that I think we need to solve in the short range transit plan is, where should the terminuses of the BRT be? So it's just stuff we haven't got to.
Yeah.
So will that plan help with that determination? That
It
short
will.
range?
It'll look at the land use and what demand will be generated out of that area.
Forgive me, but that's a shared planning process between
Yeah.
the two entities that and it's the short term means 5 years or 7 years?
It's a 3 to 5 year plan typically. The last one was done in, I think it was adopted in Caroline, what was it, 2015, 16? 16.
And then to drill down on what Tim's saying, does it use the 224 analysis as a tipping off point or as a jumping off point? Is it incorporating that previous analysis and these pins?
The 224 study, the alternative analysis, really didn't look at any demand analysis. It looked at preliminary engineering and it looked at potential environmental impacts and constraints.
It looked at the
Well, it looked at
ridership
modes
and the
too.
demand.
Yeah.
And what I will say is, if you use that as a basis, it doesn't terminate at Bonanza. But there are many other reasons why it should. So, as a team, we decided there are other reasons. It's not, just like you say, Bonanza is not the be-all, end-all. The ridership is not the be-all, end-all. There's many other factors that go into
Availability of land,
yes.
public land, all
Yes,
sorts of other
but
things,
if you
right?
strictly look at the data and the ridership demand, it doesn't pencil currently at Bonanza. So I think if we are gonna look at it in the context of the short-range transit plan, we have to craft a screening process that, again, takes in more than just ridership.
And at the time when the AA was done, the alternative analysis, we had
Right.
literally just purchased Bonanza.
Right.
We didn't really lay out what the
Probably
land
hadn't
uses
even.
were in there, yeah.
I think one of the shortcomings of the 224 analysis was that because it was all new, as the county staff, we didn't really understand it. Alfred, you didn't really know what you could say. The public really didn't understand the plan. So it didn't really make sense on its face. People didn't really see how it would work. I think it would benefit all of us as a team if when we move into the short range transit plan, we do get really detailed about how it works and why it's there and why it's beneficial.
Agreed.
But I do think when we go into the short range plan, we have to have some pretty detailed information to share with the project team. We can't just say, put it there and it'll work. You know, we have to know like 6 bays and these are the connections, and that's how the short range transit plan functions. You know, you have to have a lot of really detailed information to provide the consultant with to get something useful.
Yeah, and we'll have the land uses and the square footage and everything pretty well laid out by that point too. So we just gotta make sure that we coordinate with our partners over there also.
I see two separate, topics though. I see one being the terminus of the BRT, which I don't necessarily think has that big of an impact on whether or not there's gonna be a transit hub at the Bonanza Art and Culture District, which there will be. There is going to be a transit hub, and whether or not the BRT runs there or doesn't can be determined through the short-range transit plan. So I think we need to unpack that, separate the two and talk about them. And, I won't say anything about comments that have been made, but I just find it kind of astounding.
Can I explain a little bit why I don't have personal knowledge, but why I think the comment was made? And any comments, I think it's because, you know, from the county perspective, we have been pursuing very, very high dollar grants, a lot of money, and to pursue those opportunities, we've had to say, this is where it starts and ends, and this is the project. And, you know, I, as a staff member, had some reservations about that because we didn't figure out, you know, just because of this conversation, you know, we hadn't sort of unpacked these issues. But moving forward, I don't feel comfortable going back to FTA and applying again and saying, again, and then next year it turns out, you know, as a team, we've decided maybe the BRT shouldn't terminate there, because then I have to go back to FTA and say, hey, I know I applied for this, but we didn't really know, and now we want to do the project elsewhere. So we need a, like, sort of we need a level, a comfort level with understanding where it's gonna go and how it's gonna work, so we can pursue a $75 million grant. Do you know, I mean, that's what I think, that's where I think it came from, and from my perspective, that is why we're trying to get some pretty firm information. I mean, does that make a little bit of sense? That's why.
That makes sense.
That's what I think.
I mean, to talk about the funding that's been allocated and the grants, I mean, I saw a reference to 1.5 million having been allocated to the Bonanza Park Transit Hub through one of our joint funding sources. Is that, did I misread that, or?
No, it's in the 5-year list that we applied for grants, yeah.
So not only are there.
Well, not grants, but the sales tax funding.
Grant requests being made, but it's also being identified in the short list of capital improvements, or whatever we call that, from the transit and transportation sales tax. So there's a lot of evidence that this thing has got more than a pin put in it from the perspective of a transit hub. So again, I think we unpack it, we have separate conversations, and we try to make progress where we can. And I don't see why we wouldn't be able to make progress. It sounds like from our side, any terminus is on the table, not just Bonanza.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what shouldn't be lost too is, you know, we kind of focused on the 224 corridor and destination. I mean, 248, I mean, the utility of that location also serves both those corridors, and I don't want that to be lost.
Which is why we have it identified as a transit hub.
Correct.
Makes perfect
Okay,
sense.
so let me just be clear what I'm hearing then, as we move forward. We are not saying that the BRT has to terminate at Bonanza, is that what I'm hearing?
I think that is like what Councilman said, is it should be unpacked, and those are two separate discussions.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
To be determined, but I do wanna just comment, there's some friction on this particular one, and I think what I'm getting at this is going forward, we realize that there are a lot of things we need to pin down to get this to work. And we need to work together to pin all those things down. Going backwards, there are no victims and there's no one to blame in terms of the 224 study. That money came from the Mountain Accord and then the CWC. And very deliberately, Caroline, we gave you and the county lead on that project, knowing that you oversaw both districts and we just oversaw part of it. And the fact that Park City said this is where we think the terminus ought to go did not turn the county into a victim or have you uninformed. We were all operating off our best guesses at that point. And I think there's been some loose comments made that make it sound like we ambushed the county with it. That was a collaborative process. We need to continue to focus on collaborative processes. And I think that's where you're hearing frustration from us, is some of the stuff that's coming back, like we did this to the county, or it was something that was surprised you.
Well, it was designated by the city as the terminus.
As a collaborative process, just like you
Well,
designated
no.
Kimball.
Again, I don't think we need to get into where we were.
No, I think we
But
do,
that's-
because that is the wrap here. I think
Okay,
going
then-
forward, we can agree. But Caroline was the lead on this project. The county oversaw the project, so you were not a victim in this. Park City
Okay.
didn't do anything to you.
I don't know that we're saying we're a victim. We're
No,
just-
but council members have gone on the radio and have made comments recently that said, you know, Park City's ambushed us with that we didn't know about it. I mean, those are strong comments for people that are trying to collaborate and determine things going forward. I think what we can more safely say.
Apparently I must have missed an important day on the radio.
I mean, what we
There
can
have been
say
a
is
few
there are a
of
lot
them.
of questions we still need to answer, and we need to have good communication. And so I think at this point, I'm just suggesting we move past the past and say, we made some assumptions.
Okay, it was a request of Park City that be the terminus, and it was a placeholder. Now, as far as it being a transit hub, I don't think any council member from Summit County has any concern with you creating a transit hub there. And that's your vision. How it works with BRT is what we're concerned about. And we're not saying it won't work, but we need to do this, a real study to find out how that terminus can work with 224 BRT and how it can enhance, hopefully, overall service, like you mentioned, it's 248 and 224.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
But that really hasn't been done up to this point.
I think we're also in agreement on that.
Yeah, and that really is the next step in this process, is to get down to the service planning, and what the world is now that we know about the site. Even know how we've seen travel patterns change too. I mean, 248 has a growth rate of 5% annually versus 224, which is about 1.5%. So I mean, that's where we're seeing that growth too. We're gonna continue to see that growth on that corridor off of the 40 area and out in that part of the county. So I think
Well,
that is the next step.
The distinction being one of them has an effective transit system, the other one doesn't.
Exactly. So we will continue.
Can I just say one thing? It might be also nice to have a defined term at some point, or a loosely defined term about a transit hub, because I mean, when I look at our system, Canyons is a transit hub to me, and I think that the evolution of what is maybe a bus stop today, to 5 years from now, to 10 years from now, may all of a sudden become, you know, a transit hub. So it might start as a stop today, becomes as a larger conglomerate tomorrow, and then becomes a transit hub. So I think at some point, that's something that we should think about just as a collaborative enterprise, about when it becomes a transit hub and shared resources and shared purpose that go into that. Because conversely, something like the Canyons has great utility for Park City Municipal, right? To have a functioning transit hub at that location, that has great utility for us. And I can't imagine us not wanting to, you know, see that level of private and public investment be supported with the transit system. So at some point going forward, it might help as we suss these out to know a little bit more about a defined term. What makes it a hub? What makes it a stop? What makes it a posting or a depot? I don't know. So,
Yeah, amenities and other criteria.
Right.
And, yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else on that?
well, what about a next step on that? What could a next step be? Just to be constructive about the discussion, to make sure that we have a next step and we don't leave any kind of pieces of fruit on the table. Are there some next steps that we should try to engage in or think about, or staff can maybe work on?
It would be the short range transit plan scope, where we're still waiting for final agreement on the $5304 that are going to fund that.
So I think actually Tom expressed that the operations of Bonanza should not be included in the transit plan. It needs to come before that, during our last meeting with us four. And
Like a site-specific
Yeah.
service plan? Okay.
yeah, and you know, I think we can be actually kind of flexible on that. My bigger concern is that, you know, that short range transit plan is gonna start, I don't know, January, February, and take over a year.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we're supposed to be starting environmental on a BRT January. If we could like meet in the middle and have some type of analysis in a shorter time period, it would be good, because then we can at least keep the process going. So I think that's something for discussion and consideration.
So what about in a month, if you two, and I don't know if I'm allowed to sign work here, but is it possible
boss.
for you two, in terms of staff for the two entities, to work in kind of concurrency with these two short range transit plan, how that's gonna interplay?
Yes.
And then sussing out further the aspect of BRT, appropriate terminus, and then reporting back in a month from now about the work that's been done? Is
Sure.
that suitable?
Yep.
Maybe over next
How do we
week?
get to the appropriate terminus? Because, I mean, we know Old Town's got severe issues. It sounds like the county's got concerns about Bonanza. We're still waiting for information on aerial or microtransit options out of Bonanza that I think would deeply influence it. We're working on our programming. We know there's gonna be a lot more people, a lot more housing through the Arts and Culture District, but I assume we don't have firm enough numbers to really put that in a study right now. Maybe we can just pick on something. So there's a whole bunch of question marks up in the air. And so if we know Old Town doesn't work, we have concerns about Bonanza, are we gonna look at yet another location and land acquisition? Or, you know, then we come into reality, and land costs how do we pin this down? Because it is a point of friction, it sounds like, and we need to know how to move forward.
I mean, one way to approach it would be kind of just to do some scenario planning, you know, lay out different alternatives. And I
What
don't
would
see.
the county be comfortable with to sort of hone this in?
Well, I think that's a good approach to look at different scenarios and
Mhm.
how people move and where they move. I mean, we actually have some good ridership information showing that most people do not transfer
Yeah,
over the white.
Yeah, about 75%.
Right.
One seat ride.
So let's look at where they're getting off, you know, where they're getting on
And I think we know enough about the base area proposals also. That definitely feeds into that scenario planning. As you mentioned, Mayor, we're looking at that aerial scenario too, at least in a conceptual feasibility analysis too. So
And I
those
think-
are all inputs into these scenarios.
Well, and that's really important, because if we have people that are trying to get to Main Street or to Deer Valley, but we're saying, well, we think this is a good spot for you to be, they still have to get in a vehicle or get in some type of transportation to get from there up to Deer Valley or to Main Street. So is it faster just to take them directly there from 224, or is it, you know, will those patterns, how much will those patterns change after the area is developed? I mean, we also need to think about into the future in flexibility to meet changing demands. You know, the pattern now obviously is much different than what it's gonna be when that's completely built out, but, you know, the first time that I've heard about having a complex with 6 buses, was today, and I only heard about the aerial options and moving people out of there, you know, when I read the paper after your conversations, public conversations a month or so ago. So I would appreciate it if we could get staff together to really start looking at what you think the demand will be out of that area. What are the options for getting people there to the other places they need to go?
But holistically, right, so
But
land
right.
cost, availability of
Right.
public land. So, I
Again,
mean, yeah.
not just looking at ridership, but that's gotta be
Right.
the
Yeah.
starting point.
Well, let me ask this another way, what would we, so the county was about to enter this granting process, or what would you normally do? I mean, what would the process normally do to bring you to where you have presumably already evaluated your nodes, or whatever you wanna call them, your pins? Like, how would you have normally gotten to arrive to this point if you're uncomfortable with where you are now? Like, that makes sense.
No, I think, and quite honestly, I think we followed the process like you normally do.
Mhm.
I think it was just, we
It's
followed
more
the
like what-
process
yeah,
like you
What do
normally
you
do.
need that you don't have, or, and is it that little bit of a scenario alternative analysis or something?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it that you don't have?
Yes,
Yeah, and I think that now that the site's a little bit more, or the uses are a little more defined, I think it behooves us to revisit that. I
especially
think it's
if-
only gonna support it more, because if you look at transit, and you look at economic impact, and you look at jobs, and you look at trip generation, that site, the way it's defined more and more now, fits all that criteria.
How do we address the fact that 5 years from now, we're gonna have 2 major base redevelopments, we're gonna have an arts and culture district, and we're gonna have a major housing project? I mean, that isn't reflected in today's ridership numbers, and that's where I struggle with, how do you build a scenario on that?
well, you build it on entitled development, but I think to your point, I think that is a serious consideration, and, you know, one of the things that I've thrown out that is not ideal is that we move forward with looking at the environmental Kimball Junction to Canyons, understanding that we don't know what's happening in 5 years in town, and that eventually it will extend, but do we do a whole environmental corridor now, not knowing what's gonna happen in 5 years? Now, there are tools that can address that, and I think sort of Tom and Alfred and Matt, I think they all would rather do the whole corridor, which I don't feel strongly either way. I think there's pros and cons to each, but that is one of the strategies you could take, saying 5 years from now, it could be totally different.
Yeah, and you can do an EBA process where you do tier the environmental document also in the EIS, and you can phase it, and as things change, you revisit, and you have to implement or supplement those studies too to make sure that they're reflective of the existing condition. So, I mean, realistically, in terms of constructability and funding, I support what Caroline's saying, is it does make sense to look at Kimball, probably the canyons first, and then looking at that next phase too, and it just in terms of even just financial feasibility of constructing it. You know,
5
if
years
we
from
get
now.
fully funded, great, we'll build it all at once.
5 years from now, we're gonna have 2 new transit hubs at each base resort, so we'll have
Right.
even additional transit hubs.
Yeah, and the environmental doesn't look at any service planning, it looks at just the actual environmental impacts
So for
Yeah.
next month,
Oh.
and right away
can you
requirements.
two put your heads together on these sort of, on this
Mhm.
concept and help suss this out?
It might be talking.
Well,
Let me
I
clarify.
would say a start, but between.
Yeah, no,
now
I
and
just meant to
then,
get, you
yeah.
know, keep the ball moving down the field.
Thank you,
Come on,
Kim.
let him
Not
talk.
solve it
Thank you,
in
Kim.
30 days.
So if, that makes a lot of sense to me, that you focus on Kimball to Canyons initially, because we sort of know what that's gonna look like. Does that take the angst off of, working out where the ultimate termination is gonna be in Park City for the transit hub? Or for the, the express?
I would say my concern is just a lost opportunity. We need BRT all the way into town. And so we're just getting half there. So I see it, again, as a lost opportunity.
Yeah, and I do think the study area still does need to include that whole corridor, the whole termini, and again, kind of phasing that construction about how you actually build it or implement it based on
Which
demand.
we may have to do anyway.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
looking at
honestly.
the Costs, but we haven't seen any of that, so.
I mean, even when you do get past right now, when you get past canyons, I mean, you don't really even see that delay. It's almost, by that time, the bus mixing with the general purpose traffic almost is just as efficient as if it had its own dedicated right of way.
And what you're hearing from the resorts, basically that they're building their entitlement, is that essentially what they're saying, or they're saying that they won't come back and change the one?
Well, the closest we are right now is pre-application, so all
Mhm.
that's being discussed.
I just had,
Yeah.
I think there'll be significant projects regardless, either approach we're looking at.
they will be significant, they're, you know, they've been kinda all over the map for the last 30 years. And, I mean, 10 years ago, if you'd asked Deer Valley, they would have said, you know, we're going to have less parking at Snow Park than we do now.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have more beds. It doesn't seem to jive with their current model. So,
The denial model.
the denial. The river in Egypt.
I think one of the risks we face in doing the full corridor is that we do have to pick a terminus, so whether it's Bonanza or whatever, and understanding, like you said, it could be flexible with conditions, we do have to pick 2 ends to go forward with environmental. There's a risk that within the process, one side will not pencil and will not meet the requirements that FTA has to fund such a project. Because we are operating under FTA's process, and their process is what their process is, so that's another consideration.
Well, and we shouldn't predispose where we're going anyway, because that's a liability in the NEPA process too. So, I mean, that's really what the scoping process really is. I mean, we have guidance documents in our general plan and the AA that does say that this is the termini, and it should be revisited though, just through the environmental process if you really want to honor what it's intended to do. And not say this is where we're going, because that's, in NEPA world, that's pointing the loaded gun.
I guess what I'm
Because
saying
you're like, oh, don't worry
is-
about it, we're not doing that.
I guess what I'm saying is we need to be aware that if we do go through NEPA, there is the chance that the previous findings will not be upheld.
Yeah, and I don't think that precludes the actual fixed site from being a transit-oriented
No, I
development.
don't think so either.
So, I think we all kind of agree on that. Okay, this has been very healthy. Anything else? I guess we will work over the next couple of weeks and months to come back to you guys with some thoughts and ideas on an approach.
I think in the next couple of months, we'll be able to publicly discuss the programming potential for arts and culture districts, so we'll be able to get some better numbers there. We'll be able to talk specifics on parking, and we're expecting to have some preliminary information on area in terms of cost and kind of just do we want to explore this further, or is it pie in the sky? And should we look at other alternatives? We should have all that within the next 2 to 3 months, you think, Alfred?
Yes.
So I think sometime early to mid-winter, we'll be able to define that a little bit better for these discussions.
And I think some of our other private partners in the base area development, we should have additional information on that. So, I mean, this really isn't, I mean, I know what you mentioned, Kim, is we don't want to miss an opportunity, but the opportunity is all these things are kind of coalescing right now, and I think that's very exciting.
The missed opportunity, I thank you, Kim, for saying that, because that helps me with what I'm struggling with a little bit on this whole conversation, which gets down to, we all share the same goal. We want a BRT that works effectively, efficiently, and serves the most number of people in the best way possible. And yet, I'm sort of going, so why isn't there a high level of trust that we're all working towards that, as opposed to, you know, having a NEPA process, putting a pin somewhere so that we can proceed with the process the way the process determines. We're letting a funding NEPA process put pins in things when we should all trust each other to say, you know what, we're gonna put the best system together possible. And I don't hear that trust from the county.
Okay, I think we can have a side conversation about that particular issue.
Well, it came
But I
up
think
in
I can
your
repeat-
visioning, in your public visioning, numerous times about whether Park City is the appropriate partner, or whether it should be MIDA, or whether it should be UTA, or whether it should be Wasatch County, or whether it should be any number of other people, and competency was the term that was used repeatedly. So I sense a lack of trust on the part of the county to work toward shared goals for the best possible outcome. And I think we need to talk about that.
I think we need to establish those shared goals, but there are reasons why we're investing a lot in this system, and we wanna make sure that we have a seat at the table and are truly a partner, not just a contract relationship.
And I think
we can
need
work
to
towards
examine
that.
We need to examine that system of governance, because I think that the current system, refined, could give us an opportunity to achieve a much improved regional transit authority.
Well, and I think-
I wonder why you guys are spending so much time on the Bonanza Transit Hub, and I get it now with the funding, and you have to have a terminus identified, and there's this big, huge NEPA process. But I'm like, why aren't you guys focused on how to get people out of Jeremy and Pine Brook and Summit Park versus what is happening on the other end? You know, as you said, there are two ends. That's clearly in the county. That's clearly county transit authority and responsibility. And yet, all that this entire conversation is happening around what's happening on the other end in Park City, rather than trusting that Park City is gonna want those people to get where they need to get to in the most effective and efficient way. There is, in my opinion, no trust that Park City will be able to do that.
It's not that there's not trust, it's just an unknown. And if we're investing, what we're looking at investing in this, we need to know what that plan is. And again, it's evolving.
Yeah, I think, Tim, I don't know if it's any more complicated than somehow or another the label of Bonanza being the terminus to the White got stuck on it. And we've been trying to figure out what that means, and you don't have a lot of data, and we don't have a lot of data, and that's all that's going on. It's even more complicated. I mean,
No,
we just worked out the fact that, gee, the White could stop anywhere.
Yeah, but I mean, I listened to your visioning session. This is a whole separate thing about who's the appropriate partner. And you guys threw out MIDA, Wasatch County. UTA.
We talked about
And you talked about
multiple-
competency and trust in the competency of Park City Transit. That's a quote, that's a direct quote.
We certainly did, talk about MIDA and Wasatch.
And you talked about the
and
competency
UTA.
and the trust that you may or may not have in Park City Transit.
We're talking about the ability to serve regionally in the future. And we're talking about not the competency of Park City Transit today, we're talking about what we're possibly looking at in the future. With the
Yeah.
development that's going on in Wasatch County, I think it would be really short-sighted if we weren't looking at those potential future needs. Is that gonna happen with our BRT plan going forward, or our short-range transportation plan? I don't think so, although we better start, I mean, they've already have shovels in the ground over there. So that's coming, and that's gonna come within the length of time for the short-range transportation plan of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
But we're talking about the competency of a model of governance to handle something of that scale. So yeah, we're wondering out loud, is that going to be the right governance model? If we had no question, I think we'd say, well, let's update the ILA. But there have been significant issues with the ILA.
Does the
And-
ILA tie us together as service provider, or does the county have the option and ability to go to the downtowner and do a circulator? Because you're doing one in Kimball Junction, so my assumption is you're not obligated to use Park City Transit as your service provider. And who does it at the base of the canyons, Caroline? Is that downtowner as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Beyond
that's
demand?
not our contract.
Yes.
But
That's
yes,
there.
It is,
CBMA.
but
But
it's a
there is an
CBMA.
alternate service provider already providing service in one form or another in county transit area, authority
Yes.
area. Sam Rubin claims he can do it for everybody, you know, at a third the price and with greater efficiency. So I'm wondering, if there is something that ties us together in the ILA, we should cut that, we should sever that, so that you guys have the ability to go and look and see what other service providers, like Downtowner, we could get rid of the pink, which is an incredibly inefficient line. And when I say we, you all could get rid of the pink. We don't want the pink. But the pink only
know-
exists because the county wants service in the pink area.
I really thought, Tim, that we were gonna be moving together to look at a new form of governance. And that could end up being an update to the interlocal agreement. And that definitely needs to be done in the short term. But our visioning was to get to the bottom of what do we wanna see 20 years from now? Because that's really never been done. And you guys were gonna do it, and we're looking forward to February 5th. But if you're saying, you know what, maybe you just need to go do your own thing, then maybe we're both wasting a lot of time, if that's your position.
I am questioning that. I'm questioning how much time and effort we're putting into these things, where we have a system that, you know, creates a framework for us to have our regional authorities and merge the two, and maybe we should be focused on how those merge versus how, you know,
Well-
each of us has influence in the other's jurisdiction.
But that won't happen until we look at some common goals, and maybe that's the outcome of that. But what I know from our conversation during our visioning that we had is, you know, I know you got stuck on one piece, and I think,
I'm
You-
stuck on more than one. I could share a bunch of others.
well, and I'm sure you will. But we see something that could really serve a broader need that's coming at us really fast.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I don't think there was, at least from my perspective, I don't think any of that discussion about, who the other regional players are going to be in the future, was, in any way, to suggest that, you know, the Park City and Summit County thing was gonna blow up shortly, and we were gonna replace it with some new transit authority. But I think that, realistically, long range, when we start running buses to Wasatch County and the system becomes much more complicated and much more diverse, you may decide that you don't want to be a transit authority.
And that's what I'm saying. If there's something that ties us together, that creates a contractual obligation, we should sever that so that you have flexibility and freedom and so that we have flexibility and freedom. And we're not boxed in on this path. I'm looking at it as offering more possibilities, more opportunity to achieve our shared goals. And this goes back to our shared goals. We all want a regional transit system or authority, whatever term you use for it, that is most effective, most efficient, gets people to where they need to go, and we should be agreeing on that so that we're not, nitpicking at each other over all these little things, which raises the question, do we have trust in the shared goals and what we're trying to get to? And I don't know. I mean, I listened to your visioning session. It's like, really? You're doing this visioning now? We did that visioning 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I'm just like, how does this blend? How does this create an equal partnership?
Let's save some of this for February 5th when we've got both councils here to have the broader discussion.
Sure.
I think, I do want to circle back to, I believe we did, the 4 of us, working with Jerry, have come up with some shared vision and goals for the transit system, and I think we need to make sure and share those with our councils and prepare for this discussion. I think what I'm hearing from Tim is there's probably a secondary issue that runs through all this, is we've got to establish what the level of trust is between our entities, because it's not an easy task ahead, and if we're not gonna trust each other through this, it's not gonna succeed. So we're either gonna have to create a system that creates trust, or we're gonna have to figure out how to rebuild that trust between our organizations and really focus on our big term goals, not the day-to-day nuisances, which there are plentiful in
Well,
our transit system.
I for one am completely optimistic that we can get to that level of trust. I think we're on the road to that. We've been working hard at it. It's been complicated. It's been messy, but our people are beginning to feel like they're getting the data that they need, and we're not there yet, but we're well on our way. And so I don't maybe I don't share the skepticism of some of my other councilmen, but there's always going to be that. So,
Well, I think we're gonna have a good discussion this February on all of this, but.
yeah, and we've been through that through Jerry's draft with our council.
Good. Okay, we have anything else we need to cover today, Alfred?
I think Kim wanted to just go through some organizations under the Title VI outreach
Yeah.
update to make sure that we got some feedback from Caroline, and I'll let Kim handle it from here.
And Robbie, if you can get to the staff report on Title VI, just so everybody can see the organizations. Our Title VI program, was approved, and it is on our website. And a major component of that is ensuring that minorities and low-income populations have a say in public transportation and know when those opportunities are present. So we'd like to do some outreach to ensure that happens, and Caroline was very helpful in providing this list of organizations that we could start with. I don't know if anyone else knows of other organizations that aren't covered here that we could reach out to. But a huge component of this effort is that we are making sure that people with limited English proficiency have access to transit and can participate in the discussions. So part of that obviously is getting a translator in place. We do fortunately have a lot of employees that speak Spanish, which is the #1 translation that we're offering right now, and the need for that. But we would like to offer more. And there's a pretty inexpensive service that we can get from the state contract to have that available to our operators, to our customer service line, so that if somebody does call in and they speak another language that we don't have anyone available, we can communicate with folks. So, and that could even be, maybe people are participating in this meeting, right? But they might need translation services. So we want to make sure that we're equipped to do that and that we're reaching out to that community. So if you do have any other organizations that you think would be good for us to reach out to, just
I would add
let me know.
2 to that list, just giving it a quick look
Okay.
over, the Park City Community Foundation,
Mm.
and then some of the things like the Solomon Fund that run under them, and also the Park City Ed Foundation.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Do we collectively wanna involve our libraries?
I-
Being that those are kind of community
Yeah,
hubs, I
that
think
would be
both the Park
great.
City Library and one, the county has several as well.
Okay. And if you do think of some later, you can certainly email me as well, so, but this is a great starting point, and we can begin that effort, so.
And then, yeah, through this process too, FTA does require that we document and provide feedback and making sure that we're going to these meetings and everything. So we'll get on that, formally on the agendas so we can have that documentation and everything too.
Okay.
It's good.
All right. I think that was is that the last thing, Robbie?
Mhm.
Yeah, so unless we have
Next meeting?
any upcoming agenda items people have requests for?
Caroline, the email exchange that we had regarding the year-round nature of the transit out to the
Yes.
hospital.
Oh.
Just clarify for me what's happening with that and
So-
what it is.
It was in reference to the red extension to Quinn's
Yeah.
being seasonal. And, sorry, this is just going back and forth yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to unpack it. But just basically, this woman was concerned that someone that wanted to take a job at the hospital didn't, because she didn't want to be a burden to her family and depends on the bus and couldn't drive. And she wasn't confident she could have year-round transportation. And the person who contacted us was advocating on her behalf, but on behalf of everyone who she feels would definitely want to go to the hospital, fixed route year-round, and she doesn't understand why it's in the form it is.
And that was the email to Roger, correct?
So I did send it to you.
Yes, you did.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And that was news to me that it was seasonal.
Yes.
So that's not.
That was my reaction too.
Yeah.
I decided it was
Yeah.
best just not to speak about it.
No. So if there is something floating out there, we will make sure we just spell that miscommunication or misinformation, because that is the whole intent of that extension of the service, is to serve those medical facilities and health facilities and social services out there, which would
On a
not be
year-
seasonal.
On a year-round basis.
Yeah.
And she declined the job in October because of this concern, so,
Oh, we didn't even have the service in place at that
I know.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she just, on principle, is just giving feedback.
Okay.
That's
Well, we
great.
don't want people foregoing employment
That's right.
because they can't get to work, so.
So I'm guessing you get, every month, you get, what, a couple hundred types of feedback, whether it's route
Couple
or
hundred?
timing
Oh,
or
about that
maintenance.
That's
or-
very
Well,
optimistic
okay.
of you.
Thousands of people riding the system every month, so maybe it's less than that. But maybe there's a different way to just consolidate some of the feedback, at least for the public and for this board, at least for myself, about what types of comments and suggestions and feedback are we getting? Are they quality? Are they maintenance? Are they route related and timing? And maybe there's just a way that can become a regular item. for grouping
It'll be
those.
coming in the next
Yeah,
JTAB.
It's
we've
quarterly.
been doing it
Oh,
quarterly.
Quarterly, okay.
Yeah,
that
if
would
we were
be-
doing it monthly,
Because of
then it
the
was too,
volume.
It's because of
It's
the
low.
okay.
it was too micro
Right.
for it to do monthly, because there was like 12 comments, and the
And 11
percentage
of
of the
them were
pie
red.
was like 50% were, but there was only 6 comments.
No, and the reason I say that is because it can be helpful about allocating public resources, but I think you want to look at them in the totality of things and see, where your comments are coming from in your system. Are they coming from cleanliness? Are they coming from timing
Yeah.
and maintenance? And when you're thinking about allocating resources in particular locations that people have a problem with, type of thing, as opposed to just the kind of flinty one-off.
Yep.
So when you go to our bus stops, they have the signs that say what buses come by, color-coded times and that. Do they denote what which routes are seasonal?
They do not. Our rider's guide does, but essentially, what is seasonal anymore, Scott? Just
Blue.
blue?
Blue and yellow.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, going old school, I know we've got it online, we've got
Yeah,
guides,
yeah.
we've got communications, but it's probably worth for the few seasonal routes we have left, putting on the sign, you know, that what the times are, and then that this is November through May or something
Yep.
like that, for those riders that don't get online and look, they just show up at the regular stop and take it.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, and, you know, we could have done a better job, I think, this time with the change day, and we will do better next time in the spring, but we were scrambling with having so many route changes and everything too, and new people and everything too, so.
And I think that's good, and we wanna continue to use more and more social media and get it out there, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of our riders get their information at the bus stops and on the buses. So just what they see, they
Just
don't
front
go looking
facing.
for it. So we wanna keep that in mind.
Okay, yeah, we will.
Okay.
Thank
What was
you.
the issue, that there was a route conversion, will we do more robust outreach next time?
Yeah.
When we switched from the peak season?
Yeah, and using this group and then using our councils. I mean, the last two times, Matthew used to put together a kind of a staff communication, letting
Okay.
council know the changes, and I think that kind of fell by the wayside this time around. But for all the changes we have made, most of the variety of the feedback has been very, very positive, besides from the Baines Canyon folks. So, but we've been communicating with them too, and making sure that they are being heard. So.
Isn't that just a pocket of Things Canyon? And
It is.
if
It's like
you
6
can
houses,
Look
but-
out at the broader Things Canyon neighborhood and see if there's any feedback from other people versus
Mhm.
the ones that are, you know, on adjacent to the route and don't like the fact that there are buses going in both directions. I mean, isn't that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, and we've heard a lot of good feedback from both the blue and the green about having these kind of counterclockwise services too. So that's part of our effort too, to make sure we're hearing from
So
the
the
broader community.
neighborhoods are supportive, and we can document that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a pocket of people who are very opposed because it directly impacts them.
That's the gist, yes. And we did make some changes. We did get some feedback on, is it Prospect
Prospect Drive?
Drive, the frontage road on 224 that we had pulled the bus off of there. There was a lot of very, very avid riders on there, and it really didn't impact the system or the schedules or the routes or any of the maps either, so we put the bus back on there. So that was in the last week.
Okay.
Carolyn?
Good luck, everybody, we're coming into our peak. Hopefully those
Yes.
buses run on time,
Yes.
have enough employees,
Yeah, we do.
survive the holidays without incident as our warm-up for Sundance.
Yep. No, Kim and Vinny, they've done a great job, and Andy too, of going out and recruiting. I think this is probably the most staffed we've been, so hopefully we'll see that reflective in our overtime also, or lack thereof.
Well, Alfred and Caroline, please pass on the gratitude from both of our councils for all the work your staff are doing. I think things are running better and better. We know we got a lot of work to do, but it's a system we should all be proud of.
Yeah, I think the Woodward coming on and all that we've heard from those changes we put on the pink also have been very, very
Yeah, I heard
well
some positive
received.
feedback about that.
Yep, so,
Nice.
what?
We collectively have met our safe harbors threshold, so you can't just move a route without doing the Title VI analysis.
Yeah, okay.
anymore.
Yep. We'll make sure we do it when we document and put it in the file. Okay? All right, thank you, everyone. Until next month.
On time ending.
Merry Christmas. I forgot your record.